Hello, my name's Edward James. I'm a science fiction critic, and I'm going to be talking with Judith Clute, a Canadian artist and a member of the science fiction community, I think one should say. Um, she was, I should say immediately, I've known her for around 40 years. So the answers to most of the questions I know already, but that's okay. I don't know how she's going to phrase her answers. But I can start by saying something that I had not realized at all until I did some really in-depth, obscure research today and looked her up on Wikipedia. And on Wikipedia, I discovered that she was born in Edmonton, which I never realized. What were your parents doing? What were your parents doing in Edmonton?
Well, my father was with the Royal Air Force, and it was during the war. I was born in 1942, ancient, I know. And so he was training, yeah, that was it. He was part of the workforce for the war there. And I came along, and so he was able to kind of get out of going across to Europe because he pulled some strings. So yeah, that was me. I didn't know Edmonton then. And I can probably play around, Edward, with some things about my father, just to say that it links with you and your name.
Yeah, I
Because
didn't. I was going to start off by saying that. Yeah, well, but Judith is a Judith James,
I
same
know I
surname.
was Judith James, and my grandfather was Edward James, and he lived in London, and they lived in, and then they went to Ontario. Yeah, so there we are. Yeah.
I don't think you ever mentioned your grandfather was called Edward as well.
I
Oh,
I have I have something of his that I always use, and it's very sentimental. It's a beautiful leather pouch, and I keep my money in it. It says Edward James. Shall I
gosh.
tell you something, Edward, that I don't think you know? Because you know all this stuff about me. So I was Judith James, and I immediately after school, um, from Toronto, is where I was. I went to Vancouver. I don't know whether I've ever told you about this side of things.
No,
So
I don't
that's
think.
that's part of my Canada world. I mean, it was a really important part of that Canada world because um, it was like, when you went to university and you had, all the magic of stepping into a different world. I had that when I moved into this place as an apprentice. And there were three of us. And we lived in a house that was built in, I think it was called the British Properties. And it was like on a rocky cliff. It was kind of that kind of West Coast modernist style. But the three of us, Edward, were apprentices there. And it was this amazing place where Vancouver didn't exist. Nothing else existed except this house. So I didn't really know Vancouver then, but it was kind of magical because that's where I began. That was
So,
my
so what age were you then?
19. Yeah,
And
18,
apprentice,
19.
and what sort of apprentice were you?
An artist's apprentice. So the
I was.
artist, yeah, yeah. But it was an old style apprenticeship. I mean, it was these artists, Francois Andre and Charles Stegman. Oh, and the other really Canadian thing to mention is that I met them when I was studying in the summer school of Banff. And they called it the Banff School of Fine Arts in those days. And I think it's got some other name now. But it was a really cool place. And because I was quite good at what I was doing, I got invited to be an apprentice. And I mean, they came and they spoke to my parents and said, well, she's wanting to be an artist. So, you might as well just let her do it now rather than after university. So it was like magic. I got out of having to go to art and archaeology, which was what I was headed for. Hmm.
So did you go from there to university?
No, I didn't. No, no, I was deep in the art world. And Edward, again, this is probably something that I've never really talked to you about, but it was so Zen woo woo. It really was. It was they were really keen on the West Coast Zen stuff, like Mark Tobey and Morris Graves. Those people, probably names that don't mean anything to you, but they did kind of, they went into Zen calligraphy, and Morris Graves did these absolutely calligraphic sort of birds caught in a shape, and somewhere along the line I picked up the term cocoon to describe where we were living there, because it was like what he was doing in his art, but it was like what we were doing, because the outside world didn't exist. All you had to do, in that clever word cocoon, is have a place where you lived, slept, and worked. And of course, work is the essential thing. You have to have your paintings and your books around. And I realized that that first place, in that magical Vancouver place, I've always tried to have places like that subsequently.
Well, you've lived in a place like that since what, 1969, where you're
Yeah,
living now?
yeah, here in Camden Town is quite like that. There's another place though, and it's Canadian. It was absolutely magical. Um, at 160 Huron Street in Toronto. And I don't know whether John's ever talked to you about this place, but he found it. He was walking around. He just saw there was a sign, and we were looking for a place, and there was nothing else like it in Toronto. And I've since discovered it was built in the Edwardian time for businesswomen, nurses, and and stuff. You know, it was a mansion, said a mansion, an apartment block for that. It was this crazy red brick. It was a wonderful place. And then Judith Merrill moved in after we left.
Right.
Yeah, into this place. And not exactly where we live, because, okay, it was from, I love looking up things like this. Somewhere along the line, I found the 1913 date for that apartment building. But actually, John and I lived in the older part, which was the old building upon which that was built. And it was a cocoon as well. I mean, paintings and books. I wish you could have seen it. It was really quite lovely.
So
Yeah.
did you move out when you came to
Yeah.
England?
Yeah, John got a Canada Council grant, and what did a Canadian do and leave the country? I'm sorry, but with the money, we came here, and I haven't told you how we came. I bet this you don't know about us.
Probably not. Go on.
We came by freighter. Did I ever tell you that?
John
It was
did tell me that once,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So in those days, you could have a freighter journey where it was under 12 passengers, and they didn't have to have a doctor, so it could be really cheap. And it was a Dutch freighter, and it was going to Amsterdam en route to Rotterdam en route to London. It took us 2 weeks, and we read books. That's all there was to do. You know, it was so different from cruise ships.
Have you been on cruise ships since?
No, I'll never
What
go
I-
on a cruise.
That's what I thought. So
No, no.
how do you know it was different from a cruise?
Well, I've had Joe Haldeman tell me about his cruise ship. And he talks about getting into the tux and going and gambling and doing his blackjack and all that stuff.
So I'm just trying to get the chronology bit straight. How old were you when you left Edmonton?
1 year old.
Okay. So you don't have vivid memories of Edmonton?
No,
No.
no.
And
But I have of Banff, Alberta. It's close-ish.
where were you there? Sorry, when were you there?
Oh, well, look, when I was in school at BSS, and everybody was, doing their stuff to get to university, I was the artist. Everybody said Judith's the artist. So yeah, I went to summer school for the last 3 years while I was in. Oh, and before that, I was going to this cool place in downtown Toronto that did life drawing. So I was this school kid going and doing life drawing, and that gave me an extra skill. So by the time I got to summer school in Banff, Alberta, I was probably quite proficient at life drawing. I used to love life drawing. I don't do it anymore, but it was cool. It's a thing that artists have to do. It's their finger exercises. Yeah.
So the sort of art you were doing when you were apprentice, well, an apprentice, sorry. Uh,
Yeah, no,
is that
precisely the right phrase. No, you're right.
is did any of that feature in your later development as an artist? I'm not putting
Interesting.
that very well. To what extent? I know what your art is like now because I've seen many of your paintings. Uh, how would I have recognized you way back then?
It's a very good question. No, because I was into that Zen Buddhist stuff. Oh, I was so awful. I had a facility. I could I could I could do twiddly things. I could do life drawing with all kinds of nervous twitches. And so I kind of like used that skill, and I was doing all these kind of um wraith like imageries, and I've got a few paintings I could show you sometime, images of, but it was apparent to me eventually that it was all crap. It wasn't me. It was like I was doing somebody else's work. And it only happened in 1970 when we came here and Pamela Zoline offered me a place in an exhibition with her at the Arts Lab in 1970. So we were in 69. It was working madly. And I thought, I've got this space to fill and I've got ideas and I don't have any technique because I want to throw it out. And I suddenly invented a fake technique and I've been with it ever since. The technique was to borrow and collage and steal and put things together and somehow make them magic by just being improbable. So I put that exhibition together and it was really quite good. It was, just placing things like machine. Oh, I was really into machine diagrams. It was like a rebellion against all the pretty stuff I had been doing before. So I was collecting manuals on internal combustion engines and things like that. And I was painting these onto these boards. But the really cool thing was when Hilary Bailey, she was Michael Moorcock's partner, and they were doing New Worlds. She invited me to illustrate Joanna Russ.
Yeah.
And it was an illustration for Daddy's Girl. And I again thought, I've got to pull things together. I've got to, and so I kind of cut out. I was busy with scissors and cutting. That was what I was doing. And I had this thing that I had cut out of a woman, but it landed upside down on the other side. And I suddenly said, that's it. That's my work. And it's a really good illustration. I'll show it to you sometime for Joanna. And it went into the issue for the Joanna Russ illustration for that 1973, I guess it was, thing. But I was really grateful to Hilary and Mike. He was encouraging me as well. So that was how I started in the science fiction, in the way that my work from these days.
Did science fiction mean anything to you before you met John?
A little bit, but I confess not a lot. I got him to write me out lists of things that I might want to read, and I read, and then I thought, oh, I love it, but I hadn't really read it before. Isn't that awful to say?
No,
Mm,
you got to start somewhere.
exactly.
Just in case anyone listening to this doesn't know who the John is we're referring to, uh, John Clute has edited for some years the Encyclopedia of Science Fiction, and he's written a really good science fiction novel called Appleseed, and he's been one of the most prominent reviewers of science fiction. So he must have introduced you to stuff
Mm,
early
mm,
on in your
mm.
relationship. What sort of stuff did you enjoy reading back then?
Oh, worlds in space, kinds of, um, future building areas. Yeah, I loved James Blish and stuff. Yeah. But
So,
I'm more into, one of the interesting things about Judith Merrill when she came to Toronto, she left America for political and whatever other reasons. And she gave her collection to the Toronto libraries. And I have to admit that I absolutely loved the name that they used for her collection initially, um, Spaced Out Library. I know it just appealed to me in all that, but now it's got a much more proper name because it's a more complex collection. It's the Merrill collection of science fiction, speculation, and fantasy. But within those three terms, I would say that actually the science fiction nuts and bolts side was what really interested me in the early days, and now it's more, well, fantastica, to use John's term, which includes them all. What about you? Do you like delving into those terminologies?
I try and avoid them.
Okay.
I mean, I have written on science fiction, I have written on fantasy, I have attempted to define them and the differences between them. But, you know, the stuff one is reading now, the differences of almost, well, sorry, I'm not, it's too late at night. I'm not thinking clearly. Uh,
It's good.
the distinctions between science fiction and fantasy seem much more blurred now
Exactly.
than they
Exactly.
were 20 or 30 or more years ago. So I tend to read more fantasy now than science fiction.
I think
Um,
I do too. Yeah. Yeah. Do you know
yeah,
who I've been really enjoying is Levi Tadar?
right.
Completely over the top sometimes. Have you read him at all?
I
Because
I interviewed him once for the BSFA, and so I read all his novels up to that point, and that was probably 10 years ago, and I haven't kept up with his output now
well,
for
what I did is I read some of the, recent ones, and then the other day on the bookshelf there was this one, the Bookman series.
the, the
Book
Witch.
Bookman series.
Oh yeah,
It's
I've read.
it's kind of trilogy. And he
Yeah,
started it as the Bookman, and then I think if you talk to him, he would say, roll his eyes. I loved it. Why did I love it? Because it was so much a young person's grabbing everything and throwing it in. He obviously, as a young person, read, um, all the stuff that was in translation in Hebrew in when he was a lad, and
yeah.
that was, I can't even think of the name of Sherlock Holmes and all of those people. So in it, he's got Moriarty as um, I think he's prime minister, and just everything that he's read just gets thrown in. It's over the top. And then there's a terrorist group. What are they called? The people from Porlock. And young people don't get it, but the person from Porlock is, of course, the person who ruined the poem that what's his name was writing.
Coleridge.
Coleridge. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just so funny. So I'm not a trustworthy reader. Huh? I dip and choose, and yeah.
that was one of his very early ones, I think.
Well, that's the point. That's why I love it. I
Yeah,
love
he
people's
got much more
failure.
serious. He got much more serious later on. Um,
Yes, yes.
anyway,
Well, I mean, what
I I don't know what the time is. We're going to be cut off at some point. T t let's go up to the present day very rapidly. Uh, skip through. I've known you for 40 years, you know, isn't that ridiculous? Anyway, and I used to see you a lot more than I do now because for quite a time we lived at the other end of the number 38 bus at Turnpike Lane, and we used to get on the bus and come to Camden. It was very easy. So doesn't happen
I miss
anymore.
that. I miss that.
Yeah.
And you go to the
Uh,
British Library.
so what is what sort of things are you working on now in terms of your paintings?
In terms of my paintings, I've decided
paintings and etchings and things.
the paintings are all bigger now. They're all a meter square, everything I'm doing now. And obviously painting takes me much longer, but it's a spin-off from the things that I'm doing in the printing, which is a spin-off from the etchings that I used to do. And everybody refers to my work as etchings, but in fact, for the last 3 years, I've been doing screen prints because I can get better blacks and better weird lines and dots and things. And that's using, the computer to help me change images from this to that, but I do the printing all by hand. So I'm just hastening to add that when I do my screen printing, I don't believe in any mechanical stuff at the end. It's all done by me, ink in a trough and pulling the print.
Sorry, what's the role of the computer then?
The role of the computer is instead of my scissors cutting and pasting, I use the computer in a kind of Photoshop way. I'll say that I don't use Photoshop because it's too expensive. I found sort of cheaper ways. The Mac has an outfit you can buy and you don't have to rent it. And you can, transform, you can push, tweak, and you can put layers in. But so the game plan, because we're going to be cut off soon, is this really obsessive thing. I've often been intrigued by playing with faces and putting intrusions on top and changing things, like the painting that you have. You've got one where, it's a kind of collage part of a face and it's turned sideways. So yeah, I mess with things. But I found that those skills come to a focus in this quick obsession that I got when I read Roberto Bolaño's 2666, and that very long section that everybody else skipped, but I read it, about the women murdered in that Mexican town. And I thought, after reading the book, I felt so positioned to feel that something needed to be done for those women in a kind of memorial way. So I've been doing these kind of one after another image of these women, and I just imagine them. And then I use the torsions that I've already been doing in my work. So they're really not to most people's taste. They're a bit over the top and a bit kind of scary, but I think they're fun. And I've got about 60 now, and I'm going to do a little book, I think.
All right.
And yeah, another little book. Yeah.
Are you going to have an exhibition of them too?
Yeah, I'd like to. Yeah. And you'll come.
We may well come, yes.
Yeah, but it's not organized. So
is that a natural place to end?
Yep. Okay.
Perfect.
Last comment from each of you before I stop the recording.
Me first. It's been lovely seeing you, Judith. I hope we see you again soon. Well, Farah keeps seeing you because she goes down to London more often than I do. But I hope to see you soon. So.
And I hope to be able to come up and visit you.
That would be lovely.
Thank you both from the Edmonton team. And the next time I get you together, I think we should run some DNA tests and find out if you're related. So thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.